It all began with a small ad on the internet that didn't look like anything special. A woman was scrolling through listings late one night, half asleep and half dreaming about having a place she could finally call her own. Her rent had just gone up again, and her landlord had told her that he might sell the property soon. She didn't have much money saved, and owning a home felt almost impossible. But then, buried between overpriced apartments and broken-down trailers, she saw it. Tiny home for sale, $500, needs repairs, sold as is. She blinked twice, thinking it was a typo. $500? That was less than a month's rent. Curiosity pulled her in, and she clicked on the listing. The photos weren't great. Dim lighting, peeling paint, a sagging roofline. The little house looked tired, as if it had been forgotten for years. Still, something about it felt different. It wasn't fancy, but it had a kind of charm. The ad said the home was located just outside a small rural town, a few hours' drive away. It sat on a small trailer foundation, meaning it could be moved, though the owner warned it needed a strong truck. The description ended with a single line that caught her attention. Has a lot of history, waiting for the right person to bring it back to life. Most people would have scrolled past and forgotten it, but not her. She couldn't stop thinking about that last sentence. Something about the idea of history, and a chance to fix something old, spoke to her. Maybe because her own life felt like it needed fixing too. For days she went back and forth about it. Friends told her it was probably a scam or a total wreck. One even laughed and said, if it's $500, it's worth exactly that. Nothing. But she couldn't let it go. Maybe it was hope, maybe desperation, or maybe just a gut feeling that this little house was supposed to be hers. A few days later, she messaged the seller. An older man replied, saying the home had belonged to a relative who'd passed away. It had been sitting unused for years. He didn't want to deal with repairs or cleanup, so he just wanted it gone. If you can move it, it's yours, he said. That was enough. She borrowed her cousin's pickup truck and arranged to meet the seller that weekend. When she arrived, the man was already there, waiting beside a faded green tiny home that looked even smaller in person. The paint was cracked, the windows dusty, and the air smelled faintly of old wood and earth. But beneath the dirt she could see its bones, sturdy, simple, and full of potential. It's been here since the 80s, the man explained. My uncle used it as a fishing cabin for a while. After he passed, we just left it here. The woman nodded as she stepped inside. The air inside was cool and musty, but not unbearable. Sunlight slipped through the gaps in the curtains, falling across a small kitchenette and a fold-out bed. The floor creaked under her feet, but it didn't feel dangerous and just old. It's not much, the man said, but if you've got the patience, you could make it livable again. She smiled faintly. I like it, she said softly. The man seemed surprised. You do? She nodded. Yeah, I really do. And just like that, she handed over $500 in cash. There was no contract, no paperwork beyond the bill of sale. The man helped her hitch it up to the truck, wished her luck, and watched as she drove away. As the miles passed, she couldn't stop smiling. It felt almost unreal, owning something, even something small and broken. For once, she wasn't renting. This was hers. She parked the tiny home on a small piece of land she'd been renting for storage, an open plot surrounded by tall trees and grass that brushed against her knees. It wasn't much, but it was quiet and private. She could work on the home there without anyone bothering her. The first few days were filled with excitement. She cleaned out the dust, opened the windows, and let the breeze sweep through. She found old postcards tucked inside a drawer, dated from the 1970s, and a rusted key hanging from a nail near the door. She felt a strange sense of connection to whoever had once lived there. Every evening after work, she would sit outside with a cup of tea and watch the sunset behind the little home. It was peaceful, a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. But then she started noticing small things that didn't make sense. The first thing was the floor. One morning, while sweeping, she realized that a section near the bed sounded hollow when she stepped on it. She paused, tapping it with the broom handle. It gave off a dull, echoing sound, not like the solid wood around it. At first, she thought it was just water damage or rot. The floorboards were old and uneven, after all. She made a mental note to fix it later and went back to cleaning. But that hollow sound stuck in her mind. A few days later, she noticed something else. Under one of the rugs, there was a small metal hook screwed into the floor. like something that once held a latch or lock. But there was no door, no sign of a hatch. Just the hook, rusted and half buried in dust. It was odd, but she brushed it off. Maybe it had been used to secure furniture when the home was on the move. Still, she couldn't help but wonder. She started making a list of repairs: fix the window seal, repaint the exterior, patch up the roof. But every time she walked past that part of the floor, she felt a quiet curiosity tugging at her. What if there was something underneath? A crawlspace, storage? One night after finishing her day's work, she sat on the floor with a flashlight. She tapped along the boards again. That hollow sound was still there, clearer than before. She crouched down, running her hand along the seams. The boards were tight, but one corner had a small gap, just big enough to wedge a screwdriver into. She hesitated. Maybe she was being silly. But then again, if she was going to replace the floors anyway, what harm could it do to look? Before she could decide, her phone buzzed. It was her friend calling to check in. They chatted for a while, and she mentioned the strange hollow sound in the floor. Her friend laughed. "Maybe you'll find treasure down there," she joked. The woman laughed too, shaking her head. "Yeah, right. With my luck, it's probably a family of mice." Still, when she hung up, the idea stayed with her. Treasure. It was ridiculous, but kind of exciting to think about. Over the next week, she kept busy fixing up other parts of the home. She sanded the old cabinets, replaced the curtains, and painted the walls a soft cream color. Slowly, the place started to feel warmer, more alive. But every night when the world went quiet, her eyes drifted toward that same spot on the floor. Finally, one Friday evening, she decided to take a closer look. She got down on her knees with a flashlight, a small screwdriver, and a hammer. The wood was stubborn, but after a few careful taps, one of the boards loosened slightly. She pried it up just enough to see darkness underneath. The space was small, maybe a foot deep. She shone the flashlight in, expecting to see insulation or debris. Instead, she saw something that made her breath catch for a second. A faint metallic glint deep inside the gap. Her heart started beating faster. It was probably just a nail or an old pipe, she told herself. But she couldn't see clearly without pulling up more boards. She sat back and decided to leave it for the night. The sun was setting, and the last thing she wanted was to accidentally damage something important. But even as she tried to sleep later, her mind wouldn't stop spinning. What if it was something valuable, or something hidden long ago? It felt strange to think that this little $500 home might be keeping secrets. Secrets that had been there long before she ever arrived. The next morning, she woke up early, determined to find out what was beneath those boards once and for all. She brewed her coffee, tied her hair back, and grabbed her tools. As the sunlight streamed through the window, she knelt down on the floor right above that hollow spot and whispered to herself, almost laughing, "All right, little house, let's see what you've been hiding." She had no idea that what waited under that floor would change her life forever. The morning air was cool and quiet. A soft mist hung over the field, and the woman's tiny home looked peaceful in the early light. But inside, her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen the night before. That flash of metal under the floorboards. It might have been nothing, but something about it didn't feel ordinary. She ate a quick breakfast, then pulled her toolbox from the corner. The tiny home creaked slightly as she moved, like it was waking up with her. She smiled faintly at the sound. Over the past few weeks, she had grown attached to the little place. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and now it seemed to be hiding a mystery. She set the flashlight on the floor and knelt beside the loose board she had pried open the night before. Her fingers traced the edges of the gap, rough from years of wear. Taking a deep breath, she wedged the screwdriver under another board and pushed gently. It groaned, then popped free with a dusty snap. She pulled it aside and looked down. There it was again. The faint gleam of metal deep in the dark space beneath the floor. Her heart skipped a beat. The light caught on what looked like a small metal panel, maybe a hatch or box lid. The air down there smelled faintly of earth and old wood. "What are you hiding?" she murmured quietly to herself. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and leaned closer. The opening was just big enough to fit her arm through, but the space below seemed to go deeper than she expected. She tapped the metal with her screwdriver. It made a low, hollow sound, and solid, heavy. She sat back on her heels, thinking. It was too tight to reach easily. Maybe if she removed one more board, she could see better. Bit by bit, she loosened another piece of flooring until the gap was nearly 2 feet wide. When she finally peered inside, she could see it clearly. A small square hatch made of metal about the size of a suitcase lid. There was no handle, only a circular indentation that looked like a keyhole or latch. Her pulse quickened. Why would anyone put a metal hatch under a tiny home floor? Storage, maybe, or an old safe? But why hide it so well that even the last owner didn't mention it? She sat there for a long moment, unsure what to do next. Curiosity tugged at her, but a small voice in her mind told her to be careful. What if there was mold or something unsafe down there? She decided to step outside, take a break, and think it through. The air outside felt cool and grounding. She walked around the home, stretching her legs, trying to calm her thoughts. The morning sun had burned through the mist now, casting warm light across the grass. She could hear birds in the trees, and for a few moments everything felt calm again. But the curiosity didn't fade. After a while, she went back inside, tied her hair up, and knelt beside the hole again. "All right," she whispered. "Let's do this." She grabbed a hammer and gently tapped the edge of the hatch. It didn't budge. The metal was thick and slightly rusted. She ran her hand along the edges looking for a handle or latch. Then she noticed a small notch on one side, just big enough to wedge the screwdriver into. She pushed it in and twisted carefully. The hatch made a faint scraping sound. Dust fell into the opening and the edge lifted slightly. Her heart raced as she pried it open inch by inch until it finally popped free with a metallic click. She leaned over the opening and shone her flashlight inside. For a second, she didn't understand what she was seeing. It wasn't just an empty crawl space. There was a narrow compartment, maybe 4 feet deep, lined with wooden planks. At the bottom, something was sitting there. She blinked, leaning closer. It looked like a few small boxes covered in dust. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached down. The space was too tight for her arm to reach the bottom, so she grabbed a long stick and gently nudged one of the boxes toward the opening. The wood scraped softly against the planks. When it was close enough, she reached in and pulled it out. The box was small and heavy, about the size of a shoebox wrapped in faded fabric. The cloth crumbled a little in her hands as she unwrapped it. Inside was an old tin container, sealed shut with a strip of tape that had long since dried out. Her fingers shook as she peeled it away. When she lifted the lid, a soft gasp escaped her lips. Inside the tin were several small envelopes, each thick and yellowed with age. The top one had writing on it, neat, careful handwriting in blue ink. She could barely make out the words. Deposit. July 1936. Her breath caught in her throat. She opened one of the envelopes and froze. Inside were several old paper bills and worn, faded, but clearly U.S. currency. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. She sat back, stunned. Her mind couldn't keep up. Was this real? Could money that old still exist like this? For a moment, she just stared at the tin. It felt unreal, like something out of a story. She had only spent $500 on this house. How could this be possible? After a few minutes, she opened another box. This one was smaller but even heavier. When she pried the lid off, her flashlight beam caught a dull golden glimmer. Coins, dozens of them. She picked one up carefully. It was warm from her touch and stamped with a date, 1911. The edge was worn smooth, but the shine of gold was unmistakable. She let out a shaky laugh. "No way, there's no way this is real," she whispered. Her heart was pounding. She set the box down and looked around the small room, half expecting someone to knock on the door and tell her it was all a joke. But it wasn't. It was real, sitting right there on her dusty floor. After a while, she realized she hadn't even checked the rest of the compartment. She looked down again with the flashlight. There were more small containers below, some wooden, some metal. A faint layer of dust covered everything. It was as if someone had carefully placed it all there, sealed it up, and never came back. She sat cross-legged on the floor, thinking. Whoever owned this house before her, maybe decades ago, had hidden something that no one else ever found. But why? And who were they? She remembered what the previous owner had said. The home had belonged to his uncle, who used it as a fishing cabin. Could it have been his? Or maybe someone even before that? The thought made her skin prickle. She decided not to open the rest just yet. She needed to slow down, to think clearly. The last thing she wanted was to damage something valuable or historical. She carefully placed the boxes on her table and covered the hole in the floor with a blanket. The house felt different now, heavier somehow, as if the air itself carried the weight of a secret. The next few hours passed in a blur. She tried to distract herself by cleaning up, cooking lunch, doing anything to take her mind off what she had found, but her thoughts kept circling back. How much was it worth? Was it even legal to keep? Should she call someone? By evening, she decided to do the right thing, at least to find out what the law said. She looked up local regulations about found property and historical items. Most articles said that if an item was found on private property that you legally owned, it could belong to you, unless it was connected to a crime or a known estate. That made her feel a little better, but still uneasy. She called a friend that night, someone she trusted, and told them everything. There was silence on the other end for a long moment, then her friend said quietly, "You might have just found a hidden fortune." She laughed nervously. "Or maybe a box of fake coins. You should get them checked," the friend said. "Don't touch them too much. Take pictures. Document everything." That seemed like a smart idea. She promised to do that in the morning. That night, she could barely sleep. Every creak and whisper of the wind outside made her heart jump. She couldn't stop thinking about those coins, those old envelopes, and that hatch that had been sealed for who knows how long. When morning finally came, she brewed her coffee and sat quietly at the little table. Sunlight streamed through the window, landing on the dusty tin box beside her. The world outside went on as normal. Birds singing, cars passing in the distance, but inside that tiny home, her world had already changed. Somewhere beneath her feet, hidden under the worn wooden floor, there was still more waiting to be found. And though she didn't know it yet, what she had uncovered was only the beginning of a secret much bigger than she could have imagined. The following morning, after a restless night of staring at the ceiling, she decided it was time to get the coins and envelopes checked. The excitement from the night before hadn't gone away, but now it was mixed with a sense of responsibility. The boxes, the money, the old gold coins, none of it seemed real. She needed to know if it was worth something or if it was all just a strange coincidence. She called the local museum first, hoping they might have some advice. The phone rang a few times before someone answered, a soft voice on the other end. "Good morning, this is the History Museum. How can I help you?" "Hi. I found something in my house and I'm not sure if I should be worried about it or not," she said, trying to sound calm. The person on the phone asked her to explain. When she mentioned finding old coins and what looked like a hidden stash beneath the floorboards, there was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" the voice asked. She hesitated. "Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's a lot of old cash and some gold coins. I just need someone to take a look." The voice was back to normal. "You should bring it by. We can help identify the coins and give you some guidance on what they might be worth." Relief washed over her. Maybe this wasn't just some wild fantasy after all. By noon, she had packed up the boxes carefully, making sure not to touch them too much. The envelopes felt delicate, their edges stiff and worn with age. She had to fight the urge to rip one open and start counting the bills, but she knew better than that. If these items were important, she needed to treat them with respect. The drive to the museum took about an hour. She drove slowly, the boxes on the passenger seat beside her, wrapped in a thick cloth. The whole way there, her mind was a whirlwind. She replayed every step, finding the hatch, opening the box, and staring at the currency that felt so out of place in her life. The museum was a small, unassuming building on the edge of town. It had a few rooms dedicated to local history, with dusty exhibits about early settlers and farming tools. She wasn't sure if they had experts in old currency, but they seemed like the closest place to get help. Inside, the cool air smelled of old paper and wood. She walked up to the counter and a woman behind it gave her a polite smile. "Hi," the woman said. "Can I help you?" "I called earlier," she replied. "I need some help identifying a few old items. I found something in my house and I'm not sure if it's valuable or not." The woman nodded and led her into the back of the museum, where a small team of historians and experts worked. She set the boxes down carefully on a table, and a man in his 50s wearing glasses and a button-up shirt stepped forward. He had a serious but approachable look to him. "You're the one who called about the old coins?" he asked. "That's right," she replied. He looked at the boxes for a moment, then glanced at her. "Would you mind if I take a look?" "Of course, go ahead," she said, holding her breath. The man carefully opened the first box, the one with the old envelopes. His fingers were gentle as he pulled one out, studying the handwriting. Then he opened it and took a look at the currency inside. "This is—" He paused, running his fingers over the bills. "This is genuine. Early 1900s, maybe older." Her heart started to race. "Are you serious?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Absolutely. This is real money. Looks like a mix of older U.S. bills, some from the 1910s, even some pre-1920s. He glanced at her. "These are definitely worth something, but it's the coins that I'm more interested in." He picked up a gold coin from the other box and held it up to the light. "This is no ordinary gold coin. It's a double eagle, a rare type of U.S. gold coin minted before 1933. They were often kept in private collections or hidden away because of their high value." She could barely keep up. "So these coins, they're valuable?" "Very valuable," he said, nodding. "You have a small fortune here. The coins alone could be worth tens of thousands of dollars depending on their condition. But I'm guessing there's more to this story. Do you mind if I check the rest of the boxes?" She nodded, stunned but eager to learn more. He carefully opened the next box, revealing more coins. Different types, all old, and a mix of gold and silver. "I don't know how this ended up in your house," he said, almost to himself, "but it's definitely not something you find every day. This is a significant find, no doubt." He spent the next hour carefully inspecting everything, taking notes, measuring coins, and taking pictures of the bills. After a while, he stood up and turned to her. "I don't want to alarm you," he began, "but I think we need to call in an expert. This isn't just a random collection. Someone went to great lengths to hide this away." "What do you mean?" she asked, suddenly feeling uneasy. "I don't know yet," he said, "but the quality of the coins, the way everything's been stored so carefully, it looks like someone was preparing for something, or hiding something of immense value. I've never seen anything quite like this before." She sat there, stunned. She had no idea what to make of it. The thought that her tiny home, this little place she'd picked up for practically nothing, might hold a secret like this was overwhelming. The man continued, "I suggest we get in touch with a numismatist, a coin expert, and also a historian who specializes in local treasures. This could be a part of something much bigger." She nodded slowly. "What should I do in the meantime?" "Keep everything safe," he said. "Don't tell too many people about this yet. We need to confirm what we have here and figure out where it came from." She spent the rest of the afternoon sitting in the museum, feeling more and more out of place. They made some calls, arranged for a few experts to come in the next day, and asked her to come back the following morning. That evening, she drove back to the tiny home, still in shock. Her mind was racing with 1,000 questions. How had this treasure ended up hidden beneath the floor? Was it connected to the history of the house, or was it something much older? She spent the night carefully repacking the boxes, making sure everything was protected. She locked the tiny home and sat on the porch, staring at the night sky. The world felt strangely still, like she was waiting for something big to happen. The next morning, she was back at the museum early. The experts had arrived, a numismatist, a historian, and a few local officials. They gathered around the boxes, taking notes and examining everything with precision. The numismatist confirmed that the coins were authentic, and the historian began to piece together a possible story. "This," the historian said, looking at the collection, "looks like it could have been hidden during the Great Depression. There were many wealthy individuals who feared losing their money during that time, and some of them went so far as to hide it, hoping it would be safe from government seizure or bank failures." She listened carefully, absorbing every word. Could it be that the person who hid these treasures had been preparing for something catastrophic? Something they couldn't predict? The experts exchanged looks, and one of them turned to her. "What you have here is likely a part of history. It may be worth much more than you could ever imagine," the numismatist added. "We'll need to get a full appraisal, but this is clearly a rare and valuable collection." She could hardly believe what she was hearing. It felt like a dream. Just weeks ago, she was struggling to pay rent, and now she was sitting on a small fortune hidden in a tiny home. But the questions kept coming. Who had hidden it? Why? And what did this secret mean for her life going forward? As the experts worked, she felt a strange sense of connection to the past. It was like she had uncovered a piece of history, one that had been waiting, buried beneath the floorboards, for someone to find it. She took a deep breath. Her life was about to change, and she had no idea what to expect next. But whatever happened, she knew one thing for sure. The secret under her floor was only the beginning of a much bigger story. The days following the discovery were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and strange emotions. The initial shock of finding the hidden treasure beneath her floor had given way to a mix of excitement and anxiety. Now, with a team of experts analyzing the coins and old bills, her life felt like it was spinning out of control. That morning, the numismatist, a quiet, sharp-eyed man, arrived at the tiny home to continue his evaluation. He brought along a few pieces of equipment that she couldn't even begin to understand. Magnifying glasses, small tools to test the authenticity of coins, and a notebook filled with detailed notes. "Let's get started," he said, setting up on the small table where she had carefully placed the items the day before. His voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency beneath it. It was clear that he knew just how significant this discovery was. She stepped back, giving him space to work. For the first time since all this had started, she felt a little overwhelmed. The excitement was still there, but now it was mixed with a sense of pressure. What if they didn't find anything more? What if this was all just some strange, random stash? She had so many questions, but no real answers. As the numismatist worked, his brow furrowed in concentration. He picked up each coin, examined it closely under the magnifying glass, and made notes in his notebook. Occasionally, he would glance up at her, his face unreadable. Then, after a few hours, he finally spoke. "I've confirmed something," he said, his tone more serious than before. "This collection is not just valuable. It's historically significant." She frowned, trying to understand what he meant. "Historically significant? How?" "There are some rare coins here," he continued, holding up a coin that looked like it had barely been touched by time. "This one, for instance, it's a double eagle minted in the late 1800s. That's a piece of U.S. history, not something you see every day." Her heart raced. She had heard the term double eagle before, but didn't really know much about it. Now it was starting to make sense that these coins weren't just random. They were pieces of something far bigger. But there was more. The numismatist took out a few of the older bills, carefully spreading them out. The edges were delicate, almost fragile, but the ink was still sharp. "These bills are not just old currency. They come from a period of instability, the Great Depression. Many of the bills are from times when banks failed and money was devalued." She nodded, trying to process everything. "So this was hidden during the Depression?" "It's possible," he said. "The way these bills have been stored, the careful handling, the way they're arranged in the envelopes, tells me this was meant to be preserved. Someone went to great lengths to keep these safe." The more he spoke, the more it became clear. This wasn't just some random collection of old coins and bills. Someone had hidden these items with purpose. But why? And who had been the one to hide them? The numismatist paused for a moment, then looked directly at her. "There's more to this, isn't there?" "I can feel it. What do you mean?" she asked, heart racing. "You found this under your floor, right?" He looked around the room. This wasn't just a stash of money someone left behind. "There's something here that doesn't add up." Her stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure yet," he said. "But I believe this collection is part of something much bigger. Something hidden for a reason. You're going to need to dig deeper." The words hit her like a jolt. Dig deeper? She didn't know how much deeper she could go. She was already in over her head, trying to make sense of everything that had happened so far. But now she realized he was right. There was something she hadn't uncovered yet. Some piece of this puzzle that was still missing. "Do you think it's connected to the house?" she asked. "Maybe it was hidden by the previous owner." "It's possible," the numismatist said slowly. "But something about this feels different. This isn't just about hiding money. There's a bigger story here, and I think you might be standing on the edge of something important." That afternoon, she went to the local library. The numismatist had mentioned that there might be a historical connection, so she thought it was worth looking into the history of the tiny home. Maybe there was something in the town's archives that could shed light on who lived there before her. The librarian was kind and welcoming when she walked in. After explaining her situation, the librarian led her to a dusty corner of the building where a collection of old town records, maps, and books sat on wooden shelves. She sifted through old property records looking for anything that might point to the house's history. As she flipped through the pages, One name caught her attention. It was listed under the property deed from the 1930s, the home of a local man who had disappeared during the Great Depression. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be the connection? Was this man involved in whatever had led to the treasure hidden beneath her floor? She carefully jotted down the details and decided to ask the librarian for more information. "That name you mentioned," she asked, "is there any other information about this person?" The librarian gave her a thoughtful look. "That name's been in the records for a long time. He was known as an eccentric, a bit of a loner, I suppose. Some people said he went mad after losing everything in the crash of '29. Others say he just disappeared. No one really knows what happened to him after that." She felt a chill run down her spine. A loner, a man who had disappeared. That could explain the strange, hidden nature of the treasure. But what had he been hiding from? Or was he trying to protect something valuable? "Could you help me find out more about him?" she asked. "Anything that might explain why this stuff was hidden here?" The librarian nodded. "I'll see what I can do. I'll look through the town's old newspapers and any local documents we have. It may take a few days, but I'll get back to you." She left the library with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The pieces were starting to come together, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Who had hidden the treasure? Why had they hidden it? And what was the connection to the house? As she sat in her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her eyes darted around the parking lot, but there was no one there. It was a fleeting thought, one that passed almost as quickly as it came. That night she sat on the porch of her tiny home watching the stars. The quiet was soothing, but there was something else, a sense that everything had changed. She wasn't just a person living in a tiny house anymore. She was connected to a mystery that reached back through time, something that had been buried under her feet for decades, waiting to be found. The numismatist's words echoed in her mind. "This is part of something much bigger. You need to dig deeper." Was she ready to face what might come next? What if the truth was more than she could handle? As she sat there, a soft breeze rustled the trees. For a moment it was easy to pretend that everything was normal again, but deep down she knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next would change her life forever. The following day she received a phone call from the librarian. There was news. It was time to dig even deeper. The phone rang early the next morning. She had barely slept the night before, her mind swirling with the questions that still lingered from her discovery. Who had hidden the treasure? Why under her floor? The uncertainty of it all kept her awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the puzzle. When she answered the phone, the librarian's voice came through. "Calm but urgent. I've found something," the librarian said. "I've gone through the old town records, and I think I've discovered more about the person who used to live in your house. The story is even stranger than we thought." Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure whether to feel excited or anxious. She had been hoping for answers, but now that they were finally within reach, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear them. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The person who owned your house before you was a man named Daniel Harper. He was a wealthy local businessman in the 1920s, but after the Great Depression hit, his life fell apart. The records I found suggest that he was deeply involved in the stock market crash. People in town said he was devastated, losing nearly everything. But what's even more strange is that there are mentions of him disappearing in the 1930s. No one ever really knew what happened to him after that." Her mind raced as she processed the information. Daniel Harper. She had never heard of him before, but now it made sense. The house was old, and the time period matched perfectly with the coins and the bills she had found. But why had he hidden the treasure? And where had he gone? Did his disappearance have something to do with what she had uncovered? Was there any more information about him? Did anyone know where he went or what happened after he left? She asked, trying to hold on to her composure. The librarian paused before responding, the silence on the other end almost deafening. "There are rumors. The local history books don't provide much detail, but there were whispers about him being involved in some kind of secret operation. Some people thought he might have been part of an underground group trying to protect their wealth from being seized by the government. There's no concrete evidence, but the idea that he disappeared without a trace has always been part of his story. The idea of Daniel Harper being involved in something secret, something that could have led to him hiding the treasure, filled her with more questions. Was he running from the government? Or was there another, deeper reason for his disappearance? Do you think the treasure was meant to be a safeguard? Something to protect his wealth from the economic crash? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. It's possible, the librarian said. It's also possible that he was preparing for something much bigger. The people who hid their wealth during the Great Depression often did so out of fear. Fear of losing everything, fear of being left with nothing. They didn't know what was coming and they were trying to protect themselves. The more the librarian spoke, the more the pieces seemed to fall into place. But there was still so much she didn't understand. If Daniel Harper had hidden the treasure, what had happened to him? Why hadn't anyone found it before? And most importantly, why had it ended up in her hands? I've also found something else, the librarian added. There's a letter. It's not much, but it mentions a secret hiding place, and it was written by someone close to Daniel Harper. It might be worth checking out. The mention of a letter sent a shiver down her spine. Could this be the final clue? Was the letter the missing piece she had been searching for? Where is it? She asked eagerly, her curiosity getting the best of her. The librarian gave her the address to an old abandoned building in town, a place she had never noticed before. It sounded like a forgotten relic, a piece of the town's history that had long been overlooked. I'll meet you there in an hour, she said. Thank you. I'll be right there. The old building was tucked away behind a row of overgrown trees hidden from view by years of neglect. As she walked up to the door, she felt an odd sense of anticipation. This was it. This was the place where everything might come together. The librarian was waiting outside when she arrived. Together they stepped inside the building, the creaky floorboards echoing with each step. The air inside was stale, thick with dust as if no one had been there in decades. This way, the librarian said, leading her to a corner of the room where a small wooden chest sat. The chest was old, covered in cobwebs and locked with a rusted iron latch. With a trembling hand, she reached for the chest and lifted the latch. The sound of it clicking open echoed through the silence of the building. Inside there was a single yellowed envelope. It was sealed, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. She held her breath as she slowly opened the envelope, careful not to tear it. Inside was a letter, written in neat, elegant handwriting. My dear friend, the letter began, I write this in the hope that it reaches you in time. If you are reading this, then you have found what I have left behind, my final gift to you. The treasure I've hidden is not just gold and silver. It is a symbol of something much greater, a symbol of the resilience we all need in these dark times. You will know what to do with it. The letter went on, but the rest of the words were smudged and difficult to read, as if the ink had faded with time. She read the letter over and over, trying to decipher its meaning. The mention of a gift and the symbol of something greater caught her attention. It was clear that the treasure was meant for someone else, perhaps for someone who would know how to use it, someone who could understand its true purpose. But what was that purpose? And why had Daniel Harper left it for her? She looked up at the librarian who had been silently watching her read. This letter doesn't tell us much, she said, but it confirms what we suspected. The treasure wasn't just hidden for financial reasons. It had a deeper meaning. Harper was trying to pass something important on to the right person, someone who would understand its significance. The librarian nodded. I think it's time to ask the town's historians for their insight. We might be missing a bigger piece of the puzzle. With the letter in hand and a deeper sense of resolve, she returned to the tiny home. She knew that this was only the beginning of what might be a much larger story. The treasure was more than just coins and bills. It was part of a history that still had secrets to reveal. As the days passed, she continued her search for answers. The town's historians helped her dig into the past, uncovering more about Daniel Harper's life and his mysterious disappearance. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find any conclusive proof of what had happened to him. Yet, with every piece of the puzzle that fell into place, she began to understand something more important. The treasure had not just been hidden to protect wealth. It had been hidden to protect hope, a hope that, in the face of disaster and despair, there would be someone who could carry on the legacy of resilience and strength. In time, she realized that her discovery had given her something more than just a fortune. It had given her a deeper understanding of what it meant to hold on to hope, even when everything else seemed lost. She may not have known what the future held, but she now understood the value of the treasure beneath her feet. And so, she kept the coins, the bills, and the letter as a reminder, not just of the past, but of the strength it took to carry on. The house, once just a simple structure, had become a symbol of hope and a new beginning. A treasure hidden beneath the floor had changed her life forever. The mystery had been solved, but its impact would last far longer than she could have ever imagined.